Alberton, Hillcrest. Cool. Good morning. Morning.
Yeah, morning from Pretoria.
Morning. Thanks, guys. Lauberg, Newlands. Great. Okay, we're just letting in the last few people. And then we'll start today's session. Plettenberg Bay, Somerset West. So got people joining from all over the show this morning. Alderkrein. Okay, great. So I think let's get a head start on today's session. It's just past 11. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us. This is the part 4 of our 4-part series on AI that we have presented from STBB side. My name is Leonie Steenkamp and I head up the marketing department. And today we are going to be addressing the pitfalls of AI. If you haven't managed to join us for the other sessions, please be sure to be on the lookout for them on our social platforms where we will be sharing it. You should have also received recordings for those sessions, but we will resend a email to everyone with all 4 recordings plus the handout following this session. So please be on the lookout for that next week. If you missed the 4 sessions, the first one was on exactly what is AI and what it means. And we had a bit of an overview on that. And then we had the second session where our experts joined and as attorneys, and they just had a look at whether AI can really replace an attorney or whether you could use AI instead of your attorney. And then our session on Tuesday was all about the estate agent's guide on using AI and the benefits of it. And Brent had a look at quite a few tools that you are able to use, and we are putting them together for you in a handout that you would be able to go through after doing these sessions. So I wanted to start off with a poll on today's session, and just to get a bit of feedback from everyone, especially if you followed us on all 4 sessions. I think everyone has a bit of a better understanding exactly what is AI and where it fits in. So I think the question that we still have to answer is then oh, wow, it hasn't actually saved my poll now. But how does AI make you feel? Is it making you feeling, or do you feel terrified about it? Do you feel excited about it? Maybe everyone can just let me know in the chat exactly where we are. The one comment that we were discussing is maybe it just makes you feel like those emojis where it's just like meh. It's going to happen. So maybe you can all just let us know. Kim says she's got mixed emotions: excited, terrified, apprehensive, excited, interested. So quite a bit of curious, nervous, excited. So I think we've all got those mixed bag of emotions regarding AI, and I think it's that fear of the unknown on exactly where it's taking us. So today's session, like I said, is all about the pitfalls of AI, and Brent and Refqah will be presenting today's session with just a few house rules. Is that the meeting will be recorded. If you can please make sure that you do keep yourselves muted, just for the benefit of the whole group on today's session. We are a big group. You can chat or post your questions in the chat. We will be dealing with them after the session. And then any queries, you're more than welcome to email marketing1 at STBB. Again, we won't be making the presentation available as such, but we will be making the recording available, so you will have that for your benefit. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Brent so that he can start today's session with the AI pitfalls.
Hi, Liani. Thank you for that. Yeah, so a lot of people are fearful, I suppose. The unknown is the big thing there. So we're not really sure of what this AI thing is. And we'll take a look at some of the things today as to should you really be fearful? Should you be apprehensive? And when using it, just what should you be thinking about, what you should be looking out for, etc. as well. So the first thing before I really get into it is just, do we really need AI? So what are the benefits? Why do we have AI in the first place? So AI is just a way that computers can be used to access and work with mass amounts of information. So humans take potentially years, decades, centuries to go through the same information and find the various reference points or correlations that we use for scientific breakthroughs. So on a research front, whether it be medical research, if we look at things like vaccines and how fast they can actually map DNA strands and things like that these days, using AI for assistance behind the scene. But not just on medical research, there's all sorts of research that AI is actually beneficial for, because it can analyze huge amounts of data, find the correlations between data points that we may not have even thought of looking for, and just highlight those for the humans to then use. So massively important for research, but also for defense. So if you look at, since the dawn of time, there's always been, well, I suppose all creatures, there's some creature trying to eat another creature, but there's always been some human trying to destroy another human. And, you have sticks and eventually someone makes a gun. Is it the gun that's dangerous or the human using the gun? Well, it doesn't really matter. If someone's got a gun, you need something to defend yourself against that. So countries have interballistic missiles. They can shoot you from wherever they are without you even knowing that it's coming. So you need to be able to defend against that. So other countries create tools to destroy those when they're en route. But if you think about what happens when a missile is fired, it needs to be tracked in real time. And these are high-speed ballistic items coming in. It needs to be able to track and predict where that missile is going to be at the point it's going to deliver its payload to destroy that missile. And humans just can't do that fast enough. So computers are brought in, but the amount of anomalies, the amount of things that can affect exactly where that missile is going to be are phenomenal. There's all sorts of things about the weather, the wind, the density of the air, all sorts of things like that. So the only way we can really get a computer to pinpoint exactly what's going to be, deliver something to it to defend against it, is by using something like AI. Obviously, AI can automate mundane tasks. So there's a lot of tasks that humans don't enjoy doing. So whether that be because it's continuous and monotonous, the same thing over and over and over. Computers don't get tired. They don't need sleep. They can work 24/7. They can be very accurate and not become less accurate as they become tired or as they become bored, where humans sometimes can. So it's very helpful. And they are very powerful tools. So they can be used with, like I said, massive amounts of data to look for correlations between data points, and high speed, very fast to go through all of that. And if they're trained correctly, they can be quite accurate as well. And they're constant. So whatever output you're getting today is the same output you get tomorrow, and potentially only better, not worse. And they can be used to mimic humans. So if you think of, well, why would you want to mimic a human? So if I train an AI on my voice, so there are AI tools you can use to train the AI on your voice. There's a number of scripts. Some of them, it can take 10 minutes to get your voice into the system. With a 60-minute script that you read can be very accurate. So after 60 minutes of reading a script, it very accurately can portray and repeat your voice. You can then use a number of images and video footage to train it on what you look like, so it can actually mimic you. So we've seen things like deep fakes, where you have a video of someone that looks exactly like that person, but it is not them. it's a copy of them. And you can put these two things together, and you then have essentially something that looks like me, sounds like me, and can perform certain tasks looking like me. And why would I want that? So let's just say you've got a webinar with key players and the person becomes sick. They can't attend, they can't perform the function that's required. Well, if you do have these copies, that copy can just step in and continue. So you just feed it the script of what it's supposed to say, and it comes out looking and sounding just like the real person that would have been presenting. I'm not a deep fake. This is really me though. So on the side of humans and mimicking humans and mundane tasks, I suppose, if you look at sales is one of those industries where one of the, I suppose, hated things about sales is those cold calls, the first contact. And estate agents being a sales type industry, you have this similar type of thing where I'm pretty sure contacting and cold calling clients to look for properties that are available to be sold is probably one of the tasks that estate agents would hate the most. And AI can be used to perform those tasks for you. So rather than you doing all the nasty up and down and so forth, trying to get all these details, the AI handles that part. So whether it be a case of AI having your voice, having a script behind it so that it can actually phone people, do the call on your behalf, record all the details for you and give you the results without you actually doing it. And also you can spread that across multiple sessions. So one AI bot could potentially phone 100 people in a minute, where you could have only phoned one person a minute. So you can replicate the tasks over and over as well. And if you're looking at cold calling per se, you don't necessarily have to be cold calling. So we looked at some of the things on our last session and some tools and ways to use things like the Google adverts to make sure that your advert appears at the right time that someone is actually wanting that service. So rather than cold call, and one of the downsides about cold calling is you can cold call today and that person says, no, thank you, I don't need this. But tomorrow, they might need it. And if you're not the one in their face at that particular time, you don't get that sale. So making sure that people have the information they need when they need it is quite key. And if you look at Google as a company, the creators behind Google were in the top 4 or 5 richest people in the world when they first created Google. And at the time, they didn't have AI. So where were they getting their money from? All their products appeared to be free. And the essence is that they were at the time selling advertising. And they still do that. That is their main business, is selling advertising. But what's changed for them is that with the amounts of data they've got, plus AI, they can actually directly target the audience that you need. So we've all seen this type of thing. You search for a kettle online, and then in all your things, whether you're playing a game, whether you're on a social media feed, whether you're Googling, whatever the case is, you see ads relating to kettles. And it feels like the computer's watching you. And I suppose in a way it is. So your phone knows more about you than you probably know about yourself. I've gone through some of these things in a security talk we've done a while back, but it has a lot of data. And that data is used by companies like Google to analyze not you specifically, but humans as a general theme, and looking for those data points and key things that make people make decisions at key points. So if I then say, I want to advertise, I'll give Google some money to advertise on my behalf. I want to advertise to people in this area that are likely to be selling, and that ads will appear for them as and when. So it's what might be a case of looking at that demographic to see who are the most likely people, but also might be looking at their activity. So if someone has actually gone online and looked for a valuation on their property, well, that person's most likely looking to sell if the value was good. So that's the time. In fact, if I was in that industry, I was going to create some software for myself to use to get more business. That valuation tool would be something I would create. Estate agents, I suppose, don't want people to do their own valuations because there's a lot of things that can be inaccurate, and that's partly where the human side comes in, is to actually give you a more accurate and better understanding of what the real value is that you can actually sell your property for right now, but to have a free tool for people to go to, just to see what roughly is the value of my property right now. And that free tool, in essence, will not be free, because they'll be in the background giving you permission to advertise to them as and when they've used the tool, because now you know that they might be ready to sell. So that's the methodology that Google's used, is they give you a whole bunch of free tools, but in essence, when you sign up for these tools, you're actually getting access to, well, they're getting access to you and your information. And they're not handing out your name to people. So they're not giving away personal information, but they're keeping that personal information. They're using that to actually target things to the correct place. So just seeing if there's a sound issue, if everything's fine. Refqah, you can hear it fine, everything's good. Great stuff.
Yeah, all good.
All right, so great. So with the AI as well, analysis of data is quite a key thing. So yes, Google uses that quite substantially. Other Meta, so forth, all the different providers also use it quite substantially. And if you have people who say things like, just turn off your phone, turn off your computer, and you have a nice weekend, or whatever the case is. If you're going away out of town and you do that for the weekend, that's great. You can have a nice relaxing time away from technology. But try to disconnect all your devices for a business day. Try to get through a business day without access to any of those things. And you'll find it very difficult, because these tools have become embedded into our everyday lives. Not because we have no choice, but because we choose over and over to use them, because they improve our situation. So access to this information, being able to analyze large chunks of data, is a good thing. It's helpful to us on a constant and repeated basis. Also reducing cost of tasks. So if I wanted to get someone to write a simple script for me for a podcast, or a talk I was doing, or something along those lines, a copywriter would cost quite a bit of money. If I was to write a little document on my own, have that edited by someone to make it more correct as far as the language is concerned, or translated by someone, that can cost quite a lot of money. But if the AI tool does it, it's a lot cheaper for me. So it's not free, but I use something like ChatGPT. I type the little details in, and out it comes, and I pay a small amount of money for that, a lot cheaper. So cost is a big thing when it comes to the use of AI and the pros for the product. And then also replacing humans. Now, this is probably one of the things that makes people most terrified, is the fact that they eventually can, and to some degree already do, replace humans. But it's not always a bad thing. So if you think about, there's been a lot of talk about what they call a population cliff. In many countries, a lot of the first world countries actually have this as a concern at the moment. So countries like Japan, Italy, China, etc., where the birth rates are decreasing because the young population has decided, for whatever means, that having children is not a great idea, and they further their careers instead. So in the not too distant future, it is possible that the number of people that we have that are aged far outweigh the number of people that we have that can actually perform functions and work. And unfortunately, you can't just look after people who can work. You have to look after the entire population. So you're going to need road workers, you need medical care, you need all sorts of different things that you need people to be able to do. And if there aren't enough people, well, someone's going to have to perform, something has to perform those tasks. So having tools that can replace and perform those tasks is a good thing. Also, there are areas in the world where lack of knowledge, in areas in Africa, for instance, where doctors who can perform certain tasks just don't exist. They can't earn a living for living in that place. So they are, wherever in the world, they are actually needed more based on population, etc. But people in those areas still require care. So with AI, an AI tool essentially can perform operations, perform medical advice, and analysis on people in remote areas without the human having to ever be there. So replacing humans is not always a bad thing. Obviously, these things are done with good in mind. And when you look at those things and all the things it possibly can do for us, it is a very exciting time we live in. It's very exciting stuff that it can do. And that's great, except with everything good, becomes bad. Now, you'll see if you just looked at my previous slide and this slide here, the cons and the pros are very similar. So the things that are always good can turn around and become bad. So one of the chief cons is cost. So if you look at just ChatGPT, for instance, to train GPT-4, they say cost over $100 million, right? Massive amount of money. And that's just GPT-4. And that's not even talking about all the money that they already put in on all the research and all the training and all the analysis and all the tools that had gone up to that point. That's just retraining GPT-4. And to run it, there's estimates that say it costs them around $700,000 a day to run ChatGPT. So it's a massive amount of money. Sure, it's aggregated across masses of the world's population, so they get their money back in small chunks, and through doing that, they actually make money. But it's not just a case of creating your own module, your own AI module, because that is obviously very expensive. The training behind it, the research that goes into it, collecting the information, the hardware, the computer hardware that you need to actually run behind the scenes is very expensive. But these tools, the AI tools, are created for a set purpose. And to take that tool and use it and manipulate it to use it for your environment is also going to cost you some money. So it's not just a case of, oh, well, there's this ChatGPT. How do I integrate it into my everyday life? There will be tools that people use where they've built the software around the AI that you can interact with, and that information then comes back through to you in a digestible and usable fashion. So some of those tools we spoke about in our last session, that's where people have actually written some computer code around the AI tools that exist. So the AI tool that can, for instance, take images and recognize objects, so it can remove things out of photos, so it can automatically create video, etc. Those tools require you to put stuff in. It requires you to then use another AI, for instance, for the voice side of it. So someone has actually then gone and created a computer tool a computer program that integrates these various AI modules in one piece to give you a usable tool that you can actually use. So from a technology point of view, these things don't exist on their own as an island that you can just use and interact with. You need programs written around them to interact with your data sets, with your life, with your requirements. And if your requirement is something that's shared across a vast majority, someone will create that tool because they'll be able to make money out of it with small amounts, like ChatGPT has done. But if your industry or your requirement is quite unique, no one's going to go create that for you. And it can be very expensive to actually create for yourself. So, for instance, creating a auto reply system that can actually look at the information that you have on hand and reply to tasks, or cold call on your behalf, etc., requires integration with your systems. It requires training on more specific sets of information that you have, so that it can sound and look like you when it's interacting. So these things aren't cheap, and they're not always readily available in your industry. Another big con is obviously replacing humans. So this is the big fear factor. Yes, it can replace humans, and then what? What do we do when we aren't required anymore? So before I really go into this too much, I'm just going to go look back again at how it works, just as a quick reminder. At the moment, we only have artificial narrow intelligence. So each AI tool only performs a set task. It doesn't create its own input. You give it input, it analyzes that input, it analyzes that against the data that it's learned on, and it gives you output. So if you have a task where there's language, for instance, like a translator, you put in some text, it translates that into another language for you. So yes, you can use multiple AI tools together to try and replicate human intelligence. So you can take, for instance, a text editor or text replicator that can actually speak back in a human-like fashion. You can add translation onto that. You can then add image recognition onto that, so it can recognize images with objects. So you can feed it an image, it can look at the objects on that, it can then analyze the data points for those objects and take that as your input and then give you back your output. So the AI itself, although it can only perform one simple little task, if you take a computer program and you can collect those tasks together into a greater scheme, it can actually become very powerful and do a lot of things. So does it actually replicate or replace the human? Not directly. So the human's still required because it requires input. Where does the input come from? So until such time as it's actually creating its own input, and that's where things start becoming dangerous, is they analyze and they output based on what they've learned. So if you're giving it the wrong stuff to learn, well, the output could be dangerous. And they also, if I just jump ahead here as well, the number of tasks, well, the tasks that they can actually perform, as far as AI is concerned, is not stuff that we've always expected them to be able to perform. So if I give it, for instance, information to train on about chemical properties and so forth, so that it can actually help scientists with their tasks, and it through that knows which things can be explosive, and which rates and whatever, and the damaged areas and so forth. So for military purposes and for chemical purposes, it learns all this information and it can respond. It also now can take input from a human and respond back with a nice eloquent way and put that information in a simply understandable and simple digestible way. If a young kid had to type in, how do I blow up my classroom? That AI ChatGPT could potentially tell the kid exactly what to do to blow up their classroom. And that becomes very dangerous. And it's similar dangers to what we have on the internet itself, where all this information is accessible. Should it be accessible? What should be hidden? And those are the type of things that when the internet first came about, we had to start thinking about and start hiding and start saying, well, if you're under this age, you shouldn't be able to access this type of information, and create all sorts of things to block and hide information. But it still does occur even today with the internet and regulations that have been imposed. It's not impossible for people to find out things that they shouldn't find out. But the humans obviously create blocks and checks and things. So if you do start Googling things like how do I blow up my classroom, chances are you'll be put onto a watch list and someone will come knock on the door to see what's going on. So the AI side will potentially can do a similar type of thing, but it's all about the information you put in. So the scary part is if you put the wrong information in, it can do a lot of harm. And well, obviously we need regulations around these type of things to make sure that they aren't being trained on wrong information or information that can be harmful. And if we understand about just the nature of how it works, it doesn't actually replace humans, like I said, directly, but indirectly it replaces certain tasks of humans. If your nature of your tasks that you perform are quite simple, well, then it can replace you. But also it needs to be made slightly more creative to replace certain tasks. And one of the things we first thought about AI was, well, it won't ever really be creative. It's going to be more a factual and precise tool because that's how computers are. They can't be creative. But when you start letting it be inaccurate, when you're building some inaccuracies in the ways that it replies, it starts to become more creative. So if I was to say, text, well, it will never be creative. It can't make up poems. It can't do all sorts of things. So if you let it come back with something that is slightly inaccurate, suddenly it can do things like creative writing, poetry, and so forth. But with that, it's obviously becoming less accurate. So they need to start training the data sets to say, on this particular item, this is let's just say it's a medical set of data. This is a scientific set of data. On these sets of data, you must respond more accurately with a higher precision in your relations between the data points. Whereas with these types of requests, these types of data sets, you can reply with data that is less consistent, less prominent in what should be coming out, so that your final response is more creative. And when we look at, say, if you've ever used some of these tools or played around with the image side of tools, and yeah, it can really be used to create some fantastic things, but sometimes it comes up with really strange things. So if you have a picture of a horse that is created for you, but the horse magically has 5 legs, it does do those things because it has some error built into it on purpose to create the creativity. So it's not always as accurate as you want it to be, but it is powerful. It has got high speed. It is constant in its performance. And because of that, AI plus humans actually equals danger. So like with a gun, if a gun lies on a table all on its own, it's not really harmful. But if you then add a human behind it, it can be very dangerous. And the same thing with AI, because you can have deep fakes that can actually make something look real when it is not real. You can have disinformation on a large scale because these bots can actually go and create social media accounts on their own, because they can actually create content on their own. They can engage with and find out the best ways to actually get followers. They can very quickly accumulate a mass audience that they can provide the disinformation to. The bots don't do it on their own. Some human has actually told the bot, use the bot that's trained to be able to do these things, told it what to go and do so, go and create social media accounts in this line with this type of information so that we can get followers from this nature, people interested in these type of things. And then once you've got enough followers, they simply spew the disinformation to those people. And through doing that, it can be very dangerous. And the fact that it can actually mimic humans, where you can have, for instance, if you've seen any of the deep fakes with people like Morgan Freeman or Tom Cruise, where there are social media accounts of the fake Tom Cruise, the fake Morgan Freeman, it looks just like them, it sounds just like them, but it is not them. So if it's your president that's coming on your social media channel telling you something and people start believing it, well, once the masses believe something, they can become the problem as well. So the disinformation side of it is one part, replacing humans as in, can it perform tasks that you may require? So right now in our country, we don't even use technology as much as we could. So if we take a simple thing like parking, so in our country, we used to have little parking meters that you put money in and turn the little dial, and then the flag comes up when it's expired. And technology has been around to actually automate that and make it really efficient for 20 years, more than 20 years. But in fact, we've gone backwards. We now have humans standing in the street, and you have to arrive when you get back to your car. There's a little ticket telling you have to pay. You have to go and find that human, track them down, and pay them so that you don't get a fine. Where technology can handle that. So why have we actually gone backwards? Because we need employment. The economy doesn't tick over on its own. So you actually sometimes don't use technology, don't replace them, because if you do, it creates a bigger problem. So just replacing humans is not essentially something that's a good thing. If you have too many humans that can perform a certain task only, and you replace them, it becomes a problem. Your economy starts to suffer, crime rates go up, and so forth as well. So you would see a lot of information about, and I don't know if you've watched the video that was playing in the waiting room. There's a lot of information about people saying we need legislation, these things are dangerous, etc., etc. And if you think about how they work, they're not really dangerous. It's simply taking some information, looking for the correlations between the information and spitting out an answer. And that in itself isn't dangerous. But the main thing is humans don't truly understand the way we learn at the moment. So if we take a child and you look through the child's youth and into adulthood, there's information that goes through, and it digests information, and through some methods inside our brain, it is trained and it can perform certain functions. So how they come about and how they learn various things is something that we've always been looking into, and we have some ideas and some thoughts on it, but we don't truly understand. So when we're replicating these things mathematically to make an AI or a computer perform these tasks, the same thing applies. It's learning, but is that learning something that mimics our learning? Will it eventually get to the point where it can perform things that we haven't taught it? And there are some of these things where, for instance, it's been trained on speech. So it can read text, not just verbal, but written speech. So it can read texts and it can give you text output. But through doing so, at some point, because it's looked at all sorts of different texts when it was learning, it's developed some form of strategy. So it starts to reply in a different way based on the strategy that's learned. Sure, it's not a very advanced strategy, and it's not strategy based on emotion, which is when things become dangerous. But the fact that it has actually built strategy and we didn't design it or program it to have strategy is of concern. So are there other things that it's learning to do that we never planned for it to do? And those things are concerning. So that's where the real fear comes in. And the main thing around it is legislation. So it needs to be, well, you can't control it completely, and it's never going to go away, because once it's out there, there are the good and the bad. And if the bad are using it, you can't not use it as the good side, because they will be totally overridden. But from a pure technical aspect, it needs to be controlled as to who has access to what parts of it, what information is really being trained on, because if it has full access to everything and all your thoughts and all your Twitter, etc., 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 it can start to mimic people quite substantially. And then also just protecting rights of people. So if I had AI that was, for instance, trained on replicating a particular actor, and I replicate their voice and their image, once I've got them to perform a movie for me and I've paid them for it and I've got the movie, later on I use that exact same technology that I've got and I can make 10, 20, 30 different movies and never pay that actor again because I didn't require that actor. Whereas if the legislation was there to protect that actor, every single time I use that footage to create new movies, the actor would be protected and still be paid, and potentially now be getting revenue for not even showing up. So it's actually better for that actor. So this is where legislation needs to come in. Obviously, all the players have realized that at this point, we really do need legislation, and not just a case of, oh, well, you know, don't train out on this type of information, always check the way it's performing, et cetera, as to who can use which pieces of it, and to what extent it may replace humans. For instance, can an AI ever go into court and become an attorney representing someone in court? Can an AI ever be an estate agent collecting commission? So these are places where the law needs to come in and protect the humankind, not just protecting technology, but also protect the development of this. So it must continue in a responsible way, and your own information should be protected. But some of these tools, and if you look at any tool, actually, it can be misused. So sometimes a tool that can be used for good can be used for bad. So just imagine, for instance, Donald Trump without a Twitter account, how much better he may have been. So just because technology exists and it can be used for good, it can also be used for bad. But these are reasons why it's not actually something to be terrified of. People are looking into it. All the governments of the world are looking into it. They're making a huge fuss about it at the moment for the main purpose of getting awareness, because there's enough awareness, people will get involved to actually create the constraints that are required around it. And that's all a good thing. So is it going to replace you tomorrow? No, it's not going to replace you tomorrow. But if it's not looked after properly, it can create havoc in economies and so forth. And if you think about the self-driving car, 10, 15 years ago, we were talking about, oh, the self-driving car is imminent. It's here, the technology is there. And we do have a lot of aspects in our daily life with these things. We've even got some self-driving buses out there at the moment, but it's not a commonly used thing because there are too many aspects that from a legislative point of view, the world is just not allowed to have it rolled out properly. So same will apply to AI. Legislation will eventually come in rather sooner rather than later, and it will protect. But now, the fact that this is going to happen, the fact that there's going to be legislation means we need to actually think about these things before we use it. So there's a lot of nice tools that we can do, and we can use a lot of things for all sorts of nice things. But when we are using these tools, and we know for a fact that there's legislation coming, should we be concerned? Should we use the tools anyway and just hope that for the best? So things that can happen, for instance, is I invest a lot of money into creating a tool that I'm going to use to improve my business. And at some point, legislation says that's no longer allowed. oh no, I've wasted all that money, I wasted all those resources. If I start using AI to manage my staff and AI starts firing my staff, that's all fine and well. My company's being very efficient, but legislation turns around and says, no, that wasn't allowed. And I now face damages based on what's happened. So these are all things you need to worry about. And it's not just the legislation or the legislative part of it. It is the reputational part of it as well. So some of these things could be backdated and say, sure, you are responsible for this, but you've been responsible from the outset, and you now need to take care of the damages from the beginning. And also from a reputational point of view, if you aren't using it, chances are someone out there that's bad might use it on your behalf. So if you don't have a social media account for yourself or your business, it's quite easy for a ill-meaning person to create a fake account representing you or your business, and through that get well-meaning followers, and at some point start posting incorrect information, which puts you in a bad light and turns them away from you as a reputable source, and you lose business through that. So companies definitely should be using these tools. They should definitely be engaging on social platforms just to make sure that they have an actual presence, so that the bad actors can't be using it against them. When it comes to security, definitely you need to start employing AI technologies to protect your assets, because the bad actors out there are using it to attack already. And if you don't have AI to help you defend, well, your IT crew can't work 24/7, and it can't outgun 1,000 attacks coming from 1,000 different sources non-stop. So if you're not using these similar type of tools to defend, it's just a matter of time before you suffer major losses. So we need to use the tools, and we need to use them responsibly, because legislation will come. It's just a matter of time. And with the hype that's being made right now, the hype is not about, oh, these things are taking over our life right now. This stuff is phenomenal. It's so clever. It can replace humans already. That's not the case. But they are giving the hype because they want the various actors in the world to actually recognize that there needs to be legislation. Now, when you are training, so if you have a tool, an AI tool that you are using, often you will need to do some fine tuning on that training. You'll need to actually take some information that is more localized and just run some fine-tuned training through that tool, so that, for instance, a chatbot that you might plug into your organization needs to respond with your pertinent information, and needs to respond accurately, not creatively, and needs to respond sounding like you, for instance. When you're doing that, just bear in mind that you're not using sensitive information. Don't use client information, because once it's trained on that information, it has that information to do whatever it does with it. And it might inadvertently start spitting out things about clients to other people that you may never have expected it to do. So it's like letting a 5-year-old answer your phone. If the 5-year-old's heard stories, and this is something actually that you find sometimes at schools, where the teacher would say on day one to the parent, if you don't believe everything your child says happens at school, I won't believe everything your child says happens at home. And a similar thing applies. If the AI has learned some stuff about your clients, it could potentially use that information in a way you didn't expect it to use it. So don't use sensitive information when you are using these tools. Don't be too panicky. Legislation will come to protect things, but with that, you need to just remember that legislation is coming, and don't act in a way that's irresponsible, because at some point you'll be shut down because of it. And the information you give it, make sure it's information that is accurate, concise, and not personal in any way, not sensitive in any way. Thank you for your time. I'm going to hand over to Refqah. I haven't left her with much time, but she needs to take us through some of the legalities on the topic.
Thanks, Brent. Hi, everybody. The technological and legal landscape is changing, and we're here to walk this interesting path with you, though cautiously optimistic. And through this AI series, we hope that our message to you that you've gained from it is to stay informed, read up, follow relevant tech and AI sites, listen to podcasts, plan ahead, and act responsibly before the AI space is partially regulated. As Brent points out, we don't expect it to be fully regulated, but plan ahead. And this is just as we've done before with Refqah and Poppy. So ensure that your due diligence process that you start introducing now becomes part of your office and home culture. So how do we plan for the inevitable AI advancements? Look at areas of potential liability for yourself or your company. And in that way, you obtain your client consents to use their personal and private information responsibly. Draft and post necessary disclaimers on your documentation and online. If you use an AI tool for research or drafting, do you credit the source? Absolutely. Update your letters of engagement that you use with your various clients and service providers to keep up with constant changes in the world around us. South Africa, of course, is still catching up compared to other countries in this AI space. So as a global citizen, upskill yourself as to what your specific industry challenges and benefits are or could be globally, and adapt your business tools accordingly. While there is still a low percentage of existential threats by Terminator or apocalyptic type outcomes, the more realistic threat today is certainly to cybersecurity and personal data, as we've mentioned in our thread throughout our entire series. So exercise logical care as an employer, also as an employee, and certainly as a general online user. The second way to plan for those inevitable AI advancements is to exercise best practice policies at home and at work. And so how do you do that? Your company's engagement with clients or external parties, look at those policies, look at your in-house staff policies, and renew both the external and internal policies regularly. I mean, just doing this AI series, you know, as we've been reading up, there's so many leaps in changes and advancements every week. And whilst AI tools are incredible and advancements are happening and evolving rapidly, you need to do your bit as well to make sure that yourself, your family, your business, and your clients are protected. Your policies should guard against biased or discriminatory content being sourced by an AI. Look out for and learn about fake content generation, compromising fake material, like enhanced photoshopping tools or even porn. Review your internal policies as to your staff. What are you allowing people to research? What are the do's and don'ts of AI content as you're researching or formulating documentation? What happens when a team member creates content that infringes on the intellectual property rights of others? What's that company liability that you're exposing yourself to if you're allowing staff and team members to do certain things? So certainly look at that. Do you perhaps work in an environment where you've got physical robots or autonomous machines in your workspace? Are those supervised or unsupervised? Are you creating a dangerous or unsafe workspace? I mean, that's just opens such an interesting labor law discussion all on its own. Also consider the ethical concerns around originality and authenticity, especially in creative industries, art, literature. All of these concerns and our entire AI series raise such interesting and exciting possibilities. And as attorneys, we certainly hope to be of service as you navigate this incredibly exciting but scary environment, and produce your training data, your oversight, and your appropriate regulations as well. At STBB ourselves, we're currently reviewing our policies, our disclaimers, and our engagement documentation. And so in closing, despite all its intellectual horsepower, an AI tool lacks the human factor. And we've spoken about that throughout the series. And I'd like to believe there will always be a space for a beautiful painting or a good book or a talk by a human attorney, drawing from life experiences. So as you use these modern advancements wisely to adapt to a rapidly changing world, contact your attorney at STBB, the big small human firm. We certainly hope that you've enjoyed our AI series and enjoyed exploring the AI world with us as much as we've enjoyed sharing our insights and ideas with you. And all recordings in the series, as Leonie said, will be made available. And please do keep us updated as to your AI journey. Good luck.
Right, thank you so much, Refqah. Thank you, Brent. I hope everyone enjoyed the series that we had, and I hope that you feel that we've covered the majority of the aspects that you're facing, and we all are facing in this ever-changing landscape, called the world, basically. So, is there any questions that anyone had? I know I saw a question regarding whether we and this is to Refqah, but whether there needs to be policies addressing transparency with AI, to your clients and so on. I hope you can answer that one. Or
yeah, so I think, looking at your own space, look at your company, look at your current documentation, and then get in touch with us at our marketing email address, because we've certainly got competent colleagues who will then be able to assist you and update your policies accordingly. I think it is very important that you manage client expectations and relationships, and also be very mindful of what you might be exposing yourself to in terms of liability. So I think it is very important that if you are going to be venturing into any type of AI space, using a chatbot, whatever you're doing internally with staff, I think look at that. And then also just you need to renew that all the time, because whilst we're still legislation and regulations catch up on things like what's plagiarism anymore and what's changing and what's outdated, do get in touch, because there's a lot that we can help you with.
Great, thank you so much. If there's no other questions, I didn't see anything else in the chat. But you're more than welcome to always email us. Sorry, Brent, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add something there. So it's not just a case of, well, when legislation comes, we know that the space is going to change, and it's going to change quite drastically. So all tools bring about change. Change is inevitable. It always happens all the time. Change will be potentially quite rapid. But if you stick to the age-old things that are responsible, everything should be fine. So just knowing that when you are using these tools, like you would do with any other tool that you may use to reference information, my suggestion is always quote the fact that you used it. So don't just use things and try to pretend it was you that said these things. Quote the fact that you've used it, because that will protect you against all the other potential things that might become legislation down the road. So if for instance, people are using AI to write dissertations and so forth for universities and whatnot, they might be, well, hesitant to actually quote the fact that they've used it, because it's done all the work and all the heavy lifting. But like with the internet, in the beginning, there was discouragement against using the internet. So if you use the internet for anything to get information, it was seen as a bad thing and you shouldn't be using it. But nowadays, the children are actually taught on using the internet, and they're encouraged to use it. So with time, AI will become a tool that is actually taught and expected to be used for things as people start incorporating into their everyday life. But until that point, you need to be responsible with the way you use anything, actually. So if you are using it, quote the fact, protect yourself from that point of view. It may not be a direct fact that it is quoted to you, so it may not generally be plagiarism, because it might be totally made up that it's given you, because it can be quite creative. But if you're quoting the fact that you got that source of information from somewhere else, you've covered yourself. So from that point, just be responsible with the way you use it, with the stuff you give it, etc., etc. Just act responsible, and know that all information out there is not true. We've come to know that just seeing some news somewhere doesn't mean it's true, but we have to also understand that seeing someone do something, unless you've seen it in real life, doesn't mean it's true. Just because you saw it online, just because it looked like the person or sounded like the person, does not mean it's true. So you need to actually just change with the things that are changing. And that happens. It's just that humans take some time to adapt to their environments. and we need to be more cognizant of the changes that are happening so we can adjust and adapt a little bit quicker, and not be taken advantage of. And then legislation will catch up and everything will be okay, and it will be an exciting future. But along the way, there are going to be bad actors using things for bad, like they always are. And tools will come out all the time to help protect you as well from those bad actors. And there already are things. So Meta, for instance, already has AI bots that look for fake accounts and shuts them down. So there are tools being created to defend against these bad actors. So it's not all doom and gloom. It can be a very bright future, but you need to be responsible. And be
Yeah,
aware.
I think I definitely agree with you, Brent. I think for all of us, this is, just become a bit of a reality check regarding what you see, what you read, and what your favorite celebrities post, and what, it's not necessarily real. I can, however, comment on STBB social media platforms and say that they are all written by humans, and they are all the humans that write them are attorneys. So you are more than welcome to follow us, and to feel comfortable in the fact that the content that we share has not been generated by artificial intelligence, and that is one of our core values, and that we will stick to going forward. So I think if that's everything from everyone's side, then yeah, I think that concludes our AI series. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you've missed any sessions, you're more than welcome to get them in the following week, and look out on our social media platforms for them as well. So thank you, and so thank you so much, Brent and Refqah, for sharing all your insights into AI and the way forward.
Thanks for
Thank you.
joining
Thank
us.
you, everyone. Have a great week.